Hello and welcome back to Sydney Direct. I'm Natalie MacDonald. Now, coming up on the Australia Economic Data Calendar, it's looking pretty chock-a-block. We've got the RBA interest rate decision, we've got trade balance data, and just how will the ABS recover from last month's employment bungle? Well, I've got Ben Brun of OptionsXpress joining me next on the programme to give us the lowdown. Ben Brun, thank you very much for joining us today. Much appreciated.
Pleasure, Natalie.
Okay, so firstly, CBA have put a no change on next week's RBA rate decision movement, but where does OptionsXpress stand on this?
There'll definitely be no change on Tuesday. That's the Melbourne Cup rate decision. What's going to be interesting is the outlook for interest rates. And basically, the RBA have basically just had a template in terms of the outlook statement and just changing a couple of words here and there. But I think we're on hold at 2.5% until probably it could be a completely forgotten year in 2015. There's so many moving parts, and of course in the RBA's mandate is employment and inflation. Nothing to scare the horses on either side there. So it's almost like a 50-50 bet in terms of the next movement. Interest rate futures markets are suggesting there's a chance of a cut sooner rather than later. But the longer the economy is able to just run off its own steam, the more the chances we're going to get an interest rate rise, maybe by August 2015. So we'll just see. I think the RBA is quite comfortable where things stand at the moment. But I would suggest, that the data is going to be they're going to be reliant on the data over the short and sort of medium term. But, 2015 could see an absolutely no change scenario here in Australia, which would be amazing.
Now, we've also got that trade balance figure coming out on Tuesday. In your view, could a lower Aussie dollar help shrink that trade deficit? And is the current downward pressure that we're seeing, is that likely to play out in those figures?
Yes. Well, basically we have seen that start to take some sort of shape. We've seen the trade deficit start to narrow, and while the Aussie dollar is going to continue or potentially continue on its downward path, then most definitely that sort of the luster of imports loses its appeal. People don't travel as much, so the international sort of travel story subsides a little bit. So we have seen it start to play out at this stage, and then of course we could flip the coin to the export side. I mean, our exports become more competitive. So I think that the deficit is definitely going to continue to narrow, because I am a believer that the US dollar is going to sort of continue its resurgence. We saw that, of course, with the FOMC coming out last night, that statement. So I think that the Aussie is probably going to be trending lower the more we go out into sort of 2015 and 2016. And of course, the imports, as I said, are going to lose their lustre here in the Australian economy. So I think that trade deficit is definitely going to narrow.
Now, continuing with our huge data reel, really, we've also got those employment figures. Now, the seasonal adjustment factors were set to zero last month following the ABS bungle, almost you could call it. How is this likely to fare on the actual figures themselves? And also, what sort of credibility are we looking for with this gauge?
I'm glad you asked me that question, because for a long time I've been saying that the ABS, now of course the beauty of the ABS figures is we're comparing apples with apples each month. But if you work 1 hour, if you've got a job for 1 hour and you're considered gainfully employed, I mean, by whose measure does that mean you've actually got a job? I mean, there's complete problems at the ABS. But with the funding that they've got, it's the best that we can do, and we need to interpret the figures as they come to us. So we've seen a big movement away from the mining side of the Australian economy into, I guess, a redevelopment or a restructure of the economy away from mining into other parts of the economy. So I don't think that the employment picture is going to worsen significantly, but while the potential is there that it could, that's going to keep sort of traders on tenterhooks in terms of the RBA's next move, because, as I said, it's definitely in their mandate to maintain as close to full employment as possible. Of course, China is the other piece of the story that we haven't really mentioned. We're seeing softer growth out of China, and while that's the case, it's sort of going to have a softening impact here in Australia. So we'll keep an eye, but they do have the potential to stimulate over there, which is, I guess, reassuring for Australia, and the potential for them to do that if their growth numbers continue to worsen off. The employment side here in Australia, I can see it sort of hovering around 6, but if it sort of starts to go out beyond 6.5 towards 7, then we might have problems. Then we might start talking about interest rate cuts.
Lastly then, amongst everything else that we've mentioned, we've also got those retail sales figures. So which for you next week is going to be that market movement? Which could be the game changer?
I would say the employment numbers more than the retail sales numbers. Again, an ABS number with all sorts of problems with it. I mean, it doesn't take services into account for one, and it doesn't take online sales into account at all. So we get a bit of a read in terms of department stores and how things are travelling in terms of food and hairdressers and these kind of things. But I think that the employment figures are going to be definitely bigger, and that again, when it comes to the retail sales numbers, it does have its problems in digesting. But we are comparing apples with apples. We're probably going to see anemic growth, and we've been talking about that, especially on the discretionary side, as opposed to staples like food and groceries and these kind of things, which have been doing quite nicely. So look for not so much a game changer, but the employment number will definitely have a bigger impact on the Aussie dollar, I would suggest, than the retail sales number at this stage.
Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Much appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Natalie.
Many thanks there to Ben for his comments and insight. And don't forget, the Dukascopy TV team will be keeping you up to date on all of these releases and more, so do stay tuned. For now though, it's goodbye from me.